I'm now moving on to cutting out my waistband. I've cut this at 2¼ inch so I can overlock that edge. I don't need to do this bottom edge because I've used the selvage on the fabric, so that's already neatened off in a way. And the length, I've made this whole length 1m74. I've made it a lot longer because I want this to be a tie closure, so no hooks and eyes or zips or anything like that to close the petticoat. I'm going to use just a traditional old-fashioned tie and bow method, so that's what I've made it quite long so that there's some bit left over to tie it at the back. I'm going to go and overlock this edge now, neaten it off, and then I'll be pinning it to the petticoat. Okay, so I'm going to take my waistband and I folded it in half because I need to get my halfway point. So where it's folded there, I've just ironed it there with a bit of a crease, and I'll put a pin in so I know that that's my halfway point. And then you take your skirt and you match up side seam to side seam and then pull it and then get the halfway point between each side seam and mark that with a pin. Okay, so there we go, we're now matching up the centre front with the centre of the waistband here and pinning that in place starting from the centre front. I've now sewn my waistband on here, see that's where it looks from the outside, and we're at the very end here, this is the centre back, and there are two ways you can do this, but I've opted for this way for the video, but I will show after this another way you can do it by hand. So you've got a machine option or hand option. So the machine option is to go cut the front of the skirt waistband piece and then double over your fabric, pin in there, and where you can see the very end at the top of the waistband there, a mark. So when you come to sew it, you don't want to sew any further than that dot. So then you'll put together the rest of the waistband. Seam, that's 1.5 centimetres all the way down until you get to the end, and you're going to be doing the turn. So that Tracy's got a really neat trick because you will be turning the whole waistband the right way out. So what we're going to do is attach a piece of cord or very thin ribbon to the end here. We'll show you that in a moment, but it must be long enough
to be longer than your waistband so you can grab it. We're now ready to turn the waistband, and we're going to machine sew the end of the strap first before we actually sew the waistband in. So what you need to do is to get a narrow piece of ribbon and just pin that in at the end there, just for a minute. Okay, this ribbon has got to be as long as the strap, plus a little bit extra, because you want to be able to grab hold of that ribbon to pull the whole strap the right way out. So what you will do now is fold the waistband, move that out of the way, like so. Now I've put a little mark here exactly where the sewing finishes on the top side, like that. Sorry, just move that over out the way. And then you're going to sew from that mark all the way down, making sure that you keep the ribbon is kept out of the way. Just move that a little bit further over, like so, because when you come to sew your seam, you don't want to catch the ribbon in it. You should be able to see the ribbon through your sewing. Okay, so this is going to be our sewing line. Just do a normal seam, and then the ribbon is going to be attached there, so you can sew your seam down and then stop for a seam allowance, and then you will sew that way to close off the end and to grab hold of the ribbon. Okay, we've now sewn the seam line, and this is excess material, so you can snip your corner, being careful not to snip your sewing. The idea is that you will grab hold of the end here, and then this should pull. Might need a bit to start it off and get it going. Okay, the first bit is usually a little bit difficult. You've got to help the sleeve turn inside out, but eventually by holding the bottom of the what's it called? Strap, you should be able to pull it through. Just give it a little bit of persuasion. Not as easy as it looks. It's a very small strap, very narrow strap. Patience, I think, is behind this one. Okay, after a bit of persuasion, it does actually come through, so now that the whole strap is the right way out, and you end up with a ribbon on the outside, but that's okay, you can just cut that like so.
The other way is to do it without a ribbon and try and turn it inside out, and then you have to poke the end with something really sharp to try, well, not really sharp, but to try and get that to open out.
So what you'll then do is iron this flat, make sure that your sewing is flat, and then you can set about finishing off your waistband, which means that you'll do a seam allowance and fold it over. Let's tuck that in that. Fold it over until it meets your line of sewing there, and this you can hand stitch down. So as you go along, turn your seam allowance on the top, turn the whole thing over and pin that down. And you can do that all the way along to the end. And then if you want to do that method again, you've got to do the whole thing again with the strap at this end.
Okay, so now you can see it just naturally seems to want to fold over. You've got your row of stitch in there where you first sewed your band on, and you want to make sure that's turned in, and then pull that over to meet the stitching line, and then pin in, and continue to do that, not pulling it too tight though. Try not to pull it so the edge rolls over. You just want to tuck all that inside, have it facing up, pull that over to meet your stitching line, and then put a pin down to hold it. Okay. Now I've pinned it all down, I've threaded up my needle to actually catch it to the edge there. So I'll just take a little bit of the fabric and a little bit of the band. I do a few to start with, like you would on your machine, so it's strong and you've got a holding point. I'm also thinking as well that this petticoat is going to have a lot of lace on it, which lace doesn't sound very heavy in itself, but due to the amount I'll be having and it's going to be pleated, it's actually going to cause quite a lot of heavy weight. So I might just whip this down twice just for extra strength, because although hand sewing is pretty good, I could machine this down and that would be nice and strong, but then you have a sewing line. So anyway, I just carry on sort of catching it with little stitches, and I'm not going to go all the way to the end. I'm going to stop a few inches in because I'll be wanting to turn the other band exactly the same way as this. But I might show you a couple of different methods you can use as well for doing this strap. Okay, so we need to come back to the other end and turn that edge to meet the other edge here. And just pin it all the way along. Okay, next thing we've got to do is to sew 1.5 centimetres up from the edge like we did the other side, except I'm just going to run the sewing off the edge. I'm not going to sew up the other side and seal it. Okay, we've now turned it inside out exactly the same as how we did the other side, and I'm just going to take this ribbon off. Okay. Okay, right, I've now sorted that out. It's a little bit fiddly, so it's now nice and flat. We've got the ends open. I've hand stitched the remaining part there that was left open earlier before we turned it, and I've pressed it with the iron, and I just need to now close this shut. So I'm just going to go inside and hide my knot. And I'm just going to catch a little bit of each side and seal those shut. At the top, as usual, I'm going to do it 3 or 4 times. And then just carry on doing that all the way down to the end there, and then tie it off. Okay, so I've now completed sewing on this little waistband around the skirt, which then ties at the back. So this is where it is at this stage. I haven't hemmed at the bottom yet, because what we're going to do next is, the plan is to have all these lacy frills down the front, and we're just going to get some practice frills done and work out where they can place them on the skirt before I actually go in and do it for real. I've just set out my petticoat on the floor here, and I need to get a central line down the very dead centre front of the petticoat. What I've done is I've matched up the side seams and just pinned it together at the top and at the very bottom, and put a couple of heavy weights on just to hold it, making sure that the side seams match up. And then I've just pulled the rest of the skirt out so I can get my centre front line, and I've just placed a few pins in just for markers, and I'm going to open it out in a second and just double check it that it looks more or less central down the front. Okay, I thought it might be a good idea to iron a crease in just to help keep that centre front so I don't keep marking it. So you can just see then that will be the centre. So now I'm going to put it on the table and start working out where the frills are going to go. Okay, we're going a little bit ahead here because basically I need to, and I'd already done a lot of the preparation and practice runs way before I even started all these videos, so which has really helped sort of get an idea of where things are going to lie on me. So I have a bodice which will be in the future videos. Forgive all this is just all piping and practice runs for getting an idea of what I wanted and the general look, so just ignore this for now. What we're focusing on is after the lace will go on, I'm going to have these swags on the side here. It's sort of a dark purpley pink colour. And what I've done is I already got my pattern piece for them ready, so that it would give me a good idea where the placement of the lace frills is going to go on the petticoat. So just to have an idea of where the point of my bodice is going to finish and where this skirt is going to start sort of splitting about there-ish before it goes like that, will give us a good starting point. So we've just basically marked with some pins, and I've got Mum to do this for me while I was standing still. So we've got the line of where the purple finishes. So we've done that from basically this point here all the way to the bottom on both sides. Eventually this edging will have a bias on it, so we will probably lose about 1 centimetre to 1.5 centimetres off that, but it doesn't really matter because I plan on going at least probably 1 inch or 2 further than the line of the pins. So that will account for that for finally when this edge is turned over. So that's the stage at the moment, and as I said, we have had to skip ahead a little bit to get an idea for the markings and the placements of where all these frills are going to go.
I'll tell you when to turn in a minute. Okay, slow turn.